anyway, I went to see Joy Talley in 1999, and she said, Chris, I hate to tell you this, but you have cancer and you're going to die. And coming from Joy, I didn't feel bad. I didn't know I had cancer. But coming from her, I said, I better check this out. So I went to the VA hospital and asked them for a physical examination. And they said, have you ever had an Agent Orange exam? And I said, no. An Agent Orange, for those who don't know, was a defoliant used in Vietnam and caused many different kinds of cancer. Long story short was they found a growth in my lung, and they said, we're going to have to send you to Duke, to the VA in Durham. And I went up there, and they did many tests and concluded that I was going to die, and it wasn't going to behoove me to have serious treatment. So I didn't really want to accept this diagnosis. So I went down to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, and MD Anderson told me pretty much the same thing. And they said that I had stage 3B lung cancer, and with not very much longer to live. So a friend of mine who was a social worker at the vet center called me up and said, Chris, I've got some oncologists at East Carolina University Leo Jenkins Cancer Center that are willing to treat you. Will you come up and see them? He said, it's cutting edge. And I said, sure. And so I flew back to East Carolina, and I entered into a clinical trial along with 11 others. There were 12 of us in the trial. Today I'm the only one still alive. Anyway, I went through this chemo and radiation and got to the point where I had really a miraculous reaction to the chemo. And whereas I hadn't been a candidate for surgery before, they said that they thought that they might be able to perform surgery and remove I had what they termed a smudge. Anyway, they said initially they thought they could just remove part of my lung, but when I woke up, they advised me that they had to take my entire lung, which was okay when you consider the alternative. So everything was fine, and I healed up, and about a month later, I got a call telling me to get back to the hospital immediately because problems had developed. And I went back, and they said, you've developed what's called a fistula. And I don't know if you're familiar with a fistula, but when they remove your lung, you have your bronchial tube. And a fistula, as it was explained to me, simply means a hole. So when I breathe, they were afraid that bacteria from the air would be going into where my lung used to be. And they told me that was the #1 cause of post-surgical mortality. So they said, we've got to go in and fix it. We've got to perform another pneumonectomy. And a pneumonectomy, they literally cut you in half. So here's my story is a little bit different than any of the others because I'm going to tell you what was told to me, and it's not really, I don't remember, that's the difference in mine. I can't tell you what it's like after I died other than to tell you what happened. I woke up from the second pneumonectomy, and I remember opening my eyes and looking across the operating room, and my surgical team was on the other side of the room, and they were all in a huddle, like a football huddle. And I listened to them, I could hear them, and I could tell they were praying for me. And my first thought was, what in the world are they doing over there when I'm over here? And right about that time, one of the doctors turned around and saw me looking back at him. And he yells out, "He's alive!" And they broke huddle and came running over to me. And they were excited because they couldn't believe that I was alive. They told me that I died, and they had tried everything that they could to revive me, to no avail. They had pronounced me dead, and they were praying for my soul. And anyway, they're very excitedly going around checking this tube and that machine and doing whatever doctors do. And eventually, after about 30 minutes, they all wandered off to doing their other chores, except this one doctor. And he was standing by my bed, and it seemed like an eternity, and he kept looking at me, and I kept looking at him. Neither one of us said anything, and finally he said, "You're probably wondering why I'm still standing here." And I said, "Well, you want to tell me some more about my dying?" And he said, "No." He said, "That's not it at all." I said, "Well, what's up, Doc?" He said, "I've been a doctor here." He told me X number of years. He said, "I've been performing these surgical procedures for 20-some years." And he said, "Something happened today that I've never experienced before. And it's had such a profound effect on me. I've got to tell you about it." I said, "Okay, go ahead." He said, "We had you wide open, and we were removing some fat tissue off of your heart to use to help tie up this fistula." And he said, "All of a sudden, you started talking out loud." And he said, "We jumped back because initially we thought that maybe you'd come out from underneath the anesthesia." He said, "But when we checked, we could tell, no, you were still unconscious." So I said, "Well, what did I say?" He said, "It's not so much what you said, it's who you were talking to." And I said, "Well, who was I talking to?" He said, "You were talking to Jesus Christ." Well, I've got to be honest with you. When he said that, I just, I didn't know what to think. I'd always thought of myself as Christian, but, when somebody tells you something like that, the first thought that came to my mind was, that's not very funny. And I thought to myself, I said, why would somebody say something like that to me at a time like this? So I tried to think of something to come back with, and the only thing I could think of, I said, well, was he talking back, or was I just hollering out into the void? And he said, well, we couldn't hear any other voices, but it sounded like you were engaged in a two-way conversation. And he said, by the way, I'm going to make sure that this is entered into your medical records. And I said, okay, fine. Well, I healed up, was discharged, the sun was shining, the beer is cold, the fish are biting, I'm glad to be alive. And I went back to see Joy Talley, my psychic friend. Well, I'm standing there in the room, and when she walked in, she just freezes like that, just stops. And she said, Chris, she says, you're all lit up. She says, you got lights coming out from all around you. She said, I see angels flying around your head. Well, I thought she bumped her head. Anyway, she goes walking across the room sideways, just staring at me. And